Hello there everyone. In this video I would like to show you one of the most exciting games played in 2020, and this featured the Italian Grandmaster Daniel Dvirny and Mr. Fire on the Board himself, arguably one of the most entertaining chess players in the history of chess, Alexey. So this was played in the FIDE Olympiad, which was played online due to the COVID situation in 2020, let's not waste any time and jump right into the game. So there was d4, d5, c4, c6. So Shirov, despite his attacking aggressive style, often plays the Slav. Knight f3, knight f6, e3, bishop f5, knight c3, e6, knight h4, bishop e4. All of this is theory. This is very normal. So right in this position, white is trying to capture the bishop so that at the end of the day he has the bishop pair. It can turn out to be a long-lasting asset, a very important strategic benefit. And what Shirov is trying to do with the bishop e4 move is to get the best version of the exchange. So what he's saying is basically, well, you can take the bishop, feel free to do that, but if you're going to do this, so after knight takes e4, I'm going to play knight takes e4 as well, and my knight is going to occupy a very strong active position in the center. At the same time, the queen is going to attack the knight on h4, which is going to be clearly misplaced because, of course, knights on the edges of the board are very passive, and generally speaking, you don't want your knights to be placed there. So the theory goes f3, and this is exactly the move that Dvirny went for, and this basically forces the bishop to go back to g6. Of course, both players knew all of this. This is really one of the main positions in a Slav, so you cannot expect grandmasters to make mistakes at this point. Queen b3, and here black basically has two moves. Queen b6, which is I would say more of a positional move, and queen c7, which is a more of an ambitious move. So in case black is still interested in fighting for a win, then queen c7 might be the more logical continuation, because keeping the queens on the board basically makes the game a bit more entertaining. So white plays bishop d2. As you see, white is still delaying taking on g6, so that it is possible for white to get the best version of the exchange, and usually white does that once black castles kingside. But at this point, once Shirov played bishop e7, Dvirny just took on g6, apparently realizing that there is no point in waiting any longer. After all, the bishop here may make some sort of pressure on the knight on h4, so possibly Dvirny just wanted to escape from that. And also there are some strategic ideas for black just to escape with the bishop first to h5, and then somehow make a discovered attack with the knight on f6, putting the knight on one of the squares so that the bishop attacks the knight. It's not really an opening video, so I'm not going to explain all of the details, all of the subtleties of the opening itself here, but for those of you who play Slav on a regular basis or would like to invest some time in learning this very interesting opening, which is played practically at all levels, you might want to really get acquainted with those ideas and the lines themselves. So Dvirny opted for knight takes g6, h takes g6, and here, well, yes, white has the bishop pair, but on the other hand, black involves the rook in the game, the rook on h8, even though it was not moved. It is actually quite an active piece because it's attacking the pawn on h2 already, and this makes black's position very solid. And actually, the rook on h8, the activity that black has provides black with great prospects. So Dvirny played queenside castle. Obviously, white doesn't want to go kingside castle because, well, the black's pieces are already there, so that would be a bit too risky. And here Shirov just played knight bd7, developing the last piece. Obviously capturing on h2 is not a good idea. I'm not even going to make those moves on the board. I think it's pretty obvious that after the exchanges, at the end of the day, white gets to capture the pawn on b7, and then black is really, well, close to being lost. Actually, I wouldn't really be surprised if at this level black just resigned, because the rook on a8 is going to be captured in the very next move, and with such a material advantage, obviously there is no point in playing further at this level, of course. So instead, knight bd7, a very logical move, continuing the development of the pieces. Here Dvirny opted for c takes d5, which is probably an attempt to open the position a little bit, because logically when you have the bishop pair, you prefer the position to be much more open. So despite the fact that white had a bit of a stronger central position and the tension probably worked well for white, c takes d5 is also a logical attempt to make the position more open, to get access to black's position, to infiltrate later on, and also to use the c file to attack the black queen. So white intends to go rook c1, king b1 was a move aimed at sidestepping all of the threats that the black queen could create along the c file, but also to leave the c file c1 square for the rook, so that it can be used for some attacking actions along the c file. So let's take a look how Shirov reacted. Here he played a6, which is a very smart prophylaxis. First of all, it's not allowing the knight or the bishop to jump on b5, which is very logical at this point, because those pieces could be easily used in the attack. But also this prepares simply an attack on queenside. Generally speaking, this is a kind of a standard plan for both of the players in such a position. What black wants to do is to attack with the pawns on queenside, so that once the pawns advance, the probability of exchanging the pawns leading to open b and a files increases, and at the same time white is still probably not sure what black intends to do as regards his king's position, because if black had the king already on g8, then white's plan is already also very simple. It's just about advancing the pawns on h and g files, so that again, once they advance, h file and g file possibly get open, then those files could be used by the rooks, possibly some diagonals would also be open. So white would also love to have the opportunity of attacking the black's king from the distance. However, the black king is still on e8, and this makes this position quite tricky, and probably at this point, at this very point, Dvirny missed the right conception and the right concept, and what he was supposed to do was most likely just to go e4 in order to open the position just like that, and in case the pawns get exchanged, then again probably e or d file will get open, and hopefully for white there will be access to the black king. Instead, first Dvirny played rook c1. This is actually still okay, but after queen b8, which is again sidestepping from all of the threats along c file, probably this was the last moment to play e4. Instead, Dvirny played h4, and after b5 it turns out that e4 is not really a possibility anymore, because when that happens, black probably has b4, and after knight to a4, pawn takes on e4, black is up a healthy pawn, and it's quite clear that white did not achieve anything in this position. So h4 was played probably just to scare Shirov so that he doesn't castle kingside, but I don't really believe that worked, because well, you're about to see that he did castle kingside anyway. So after h4 b5 there was a4, On one hand, this is a move to challenge the black's pawn formation, and I believe that after the exchange on a4, if that happens, white is really okay with exchanging the queens, because then again the position gets open. The bishops are going to be an asset, a long-lasting asset for white in this complex endgame. So, well, Shirov wasn't, of course, happy to take on a4, and instead he just castled. He castled, and white replied a5, trying to fix the pawn formation there, not to allow black to capture at a later stage of the game. So a5 was played, and here rook to c8. Quite a logical continuation. So the last piece enters in the game. Shirov, of course, wants to take advantage, take the most out of all of the files that he has currently available to him on queen side. So the C file is fully open. The B file also has some potential to be used, but the C file is clearly the most important part of the board as regards black's attacking chances. So after f4, after rook c8, white had probably the last moment where he could really get an advantage out of the opening, and this was actually a very logical move that should have been played in this position. Again, whenever you play with kings placed on opposite wings, the most logical plan assumes just starting the pawn avalanche in order to open the position and just be able to attack the opponent's king from the distance. So black tries attacking with his A and B pawns on queen side, and at the same time white should use his H and G pawns, possibly also playing G4 in a moment, on king side. Instead, for a mysterious reason, Dvirny played bishop d3. You might argue, well, this is a perfectly reasonable move after all. The bishop was undeveloped. Right now it is much better positioned, so what's the point here? Shirov was very smart at this point. He realized that, of course, Dvirny understands what needs to be done. He knows that g4 is going to come sooner or later. So when that happens, white is actually going to be ready to play g4 and h5 in just a nick of time. And when that happens, white's attack is really going to be very dangerous. So what he did here is, on one hand, a very surprising move, but on the other, this is a strategic masterpiece depicting his understanding, deep understanding of this position. So he played queen g3, and it might look like a ridiculous move right now, because what is the queen doing there? You're not supposed to play on the part of the board where you're going to attack, where you are weaker. But what he is doing here, what Shirov is trying to achieve on king side, is basically to slow white down, to make sure that white is going to have to drive the queen away before he launches the attack, and in the meantime he is going to have a chance to attack on the queen side. This is really a deep move with a huge level of understanding required. So after queen g3, white just played rook c to g1, and it's quite a logical move, because if you look at it, white wants to first protect the pawn on g2 and then drive the queen away, and only then play g4. So as you see, white needs to spend as many as 3 moves just to, or 2 or 3 moves just to drive the black queen away, and only then start pushing his pawns forward. And what black is going to do, if needed, he's just going to retreat with the queen, and he's still going to be much faster than white. So after rook c to g1, another astonishing move came. Probably Shirov realized that pushing the b pawn is not really going to lead him anywhere, because nothing is going to be opened after this move. So it's really pointless to play b4. Instead, he needed to force white to open the position, and that's why he played rook c4. So what he's trying to do right now is to open the position at the cost of an exchange. And again, this shows great positional understanding. It's really about the time here. The pace of the attack is far more important than the material itself. Yes, white may take the exchange. He's going to have a material advantage, but at the same time, black is going to take over the initiative, and it might turn out to be much more important than the material itself. So rook c4, objectively, the computer says that it's not that great, and it's possibly not what should have been done here. On the other hand, well, it's a practical game of chess, and as a human being, Dvirny had to make a decision, and capturing on c4 really looks like not the brightest idea. Black has two possibilities. He can capture with the d-pawn, and once the queen retreats, he could later on just play b4, and, well, the pawns are just going to roll. This is quite obvious that black is going to have the initiative there, and the fact that he has a knight for a rook doesn't really make a difference. It's a piece. It's still a piece. It's probably good enough. Alternatively, b takes c4 could be tried, although I'm not really convinced about the strength of this move, to be honest, because it sort of loses the momentum. It's not quite clear how black is going to progress with the attack. Of course, he can occupy the b file with the rook and have attack there, but at the same time, without pawn breaks, it might be much more difficult for black to get access to the white king simply. So after rook c4, Dvirny didn't take it. Instead, he played f4. This was the move I mistakenly mentioned a moment ago. And here, of course, just rook a to c8, bringing the other resources. Now, taking on c4 becomes even more scary because all of black's pieces are already involved. And in the meantime, white is still a bit paralyzed on kingside. Still, you have to have great confidence about playing such a position, because it looks like the queen might be running out of squares very, very quickly. Still, if you're Alexey Shirov, your calculation technique is superb, and probably you can predict what's going to happen. So at this point, queen d1 was played, probably just to avoid rook b4, which could have been one of the attacking ideas for black, logically. And after queen d1, one of the benefits here is that the g4 square might be taken away from black, and as a result, rook h3 might turn out to be a much stronger threat. So Shirov just played b4, there's no time to waste. Knight e2, queen g4, knight c1, and here came the move that really caught my attention. This is actually really why I wanted to show you this game. It's possible to exchange the queens, but then it turns out that black's attack really didn't make any sense. Instead, Shirov found this beautiful move, knight to e4, sacrificing the queen. But if you start looking at it, after queen takes g4, there's knight takes d2 check, and for example, after king a2, there's b3 check, knight takes b3, rook a4 with checkmate. And if instead white goes king a1, then also b3 is going to lead to checkmate, because after bishop takes c4, rook takes c4, rook a4 is inevitable, and knight a2 also, rook a4. Black is just crushing. Fantastic sacrifice. I'm not sure how calculated this was. Probably it was well calculated, because we're talking about Alexey Shirov. So bishop e2 was played. Instead, queen f5, creating threats already, and white is in grave danger. Bishop d3, knight to f6, bringing more resources, and even though it looks like the white player is going to trap the black queen, g4 after all does trap the queen for a moment, but Shirov knew that this is not really dangerous. He played knight takes g4, rook takes g4, and based on the same concept, he just took queen takes g4, sacrificing the queen again. The wild queen here was the main concept of the sacrifice. Queen takes g4, knight d2, king a2 leads to the same checkmate we discussed. King a1 was played, and after rook c1, Dvirny simply realized that it's pointless to play on because once the rook takes, bishop b1, you could prolong the game like that, but after rook takes b1, king a2, b3 comes with checkmate because the bishop enters the game. The bishop which just made one move in the game, and it looked pretty much uninvolved throughout the majority of the game. At the end, it becomes the most important piece, covering the a3 square. Again, after rook c1, Dvirny just resigned, so it's what I showed you was not the game continuation, but this is how you could actually prove that the whole sacrifice works. For me, this was a brilliant queen sacrifice, and actually the whole idea of putting the queen right in front of the pawn, the g2 pawn, this was a strategic masterpiece, because Shirov realized that his best chance is actually not only to not exactly to go for the pawn race, because he's not going to be faster. So instead, he decided to put his queen on a bit of a dangerous position, because it could be even trapped, so that he slows white's attack down and has his own respective chance on the queen side. Great game, in my opinion, one of my favorites in the past year. Thanks for watching.